it would not be possible to achieve the SDGs, and realizing the SDGs moves us closer towards our culture of peace. With just around 15% of the SDGs on track to be met, there is much to be done. To make any progress, there is a critical need not only for a robust engagement of the 1.2 billion young people around the world, but for us to ensure that there is equity, equality, and justice for all. And for this to become a reality, we must truly, totally eliminate racism and all kinds of discrimination. As we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights later this year, the need to uphold the right to equality is more important now than ever. 75 years ago, the international community committed to recognize that, and I quote, "All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights, regardless of nationality, place of residence, sex, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, language, or any other status," end quote. Since then, the international community has witnessed significant advancements. However, progress does not mean the fight for rights and equality has come to an end. And today, even after 50 years of the International Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, systematic racism and pervasive legacy of slavery and colonialism continue to hinder billions of people from enjoying their full rights and freedom. And religious leaders, we're talking about men, women, and youth, with their vast reach, access, and influence, are in a position to address this and ensure a lasting positive change. Religions of Peace, the organization that I serve, is the largest and most representative coalition of religious leaders and their institutions spread across nearly 100 countries in 5 regions. For over 52 years, we have been convening the world's religious and indigenous communities, grassroots women of faith, and youth networks to catalyze and promote multi-religious collaboration and action. At the heart of Religions of Peace is our commitment to advance the cooperation of the world's religious and faith communities to protect human dignity and promote human flourishing that ensures that no one is left behind. Racism, while rooted in prejudice against certain groups of people and marginalized communities, has lasting and far-reaching implications that do not discriminate, affecting people of all ages, cultures, ethnicities, religions, and backgrounds. In various ways, systematic racism has been a significant roadblock to the international community's efforts in addressing the most pressing global issues, including the desired progress in achieving the SDGs. In the context of faith, racism is a violation of the core principles deeply held and widely shared by the world's religions. It is with this understanding that Religions of Peace advances the meaningful engagement of youth in addressing racism and promoting a sustainable future for all. As equal partners in our work, our global, regional, national, and local interfaith youth leaders and communities bring moral agency and innovative solutions as they serve at the front lines of responding to the world's most intractable issues, including combating all forms of racism and discrimination. As evidenced by our decades of multi-religious work, Religions of Peace nurtures and catalyzes opportunities for intergenerational dialogue and action. In this regard, we have found good allies and partners in Islamic Cooperation Youth Forum and the International Islamic Fiqh Academy, whose mission and bold vision align not only with our work, but also with the aspiration of our interfaith youth movement. Together, we will continue to mobilize and deploy the spiritual, moral, and social assets of our movement to cultivate societies that rest on equality, respect, and justice for all. Together, we can eliminate regressive views, change behaviors with unified voice and action, and root out racism and racial discrimination with strong engagement, participation, and mobilization of the youth. And I'm really looking forward to hearing the voices of the youth today. Thank you so much.
you so much, Ms. Singh. Your Excellency, Dr. Ihan, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Peace be upon you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. To all the participants here today and to all the audience online, I express my thankfulness and also I want to express my gratitude for RFP team because they have done a great job. Thank you very much for great hospitality and always supportive to ICYF and our mission as the youth of the OIC countries. And today we are here to discuss one of the biggest problems of the youth in the OIC countries, in 56 different countries, and the diasporas in non-member states. Racism, or the form that we are facing in everyday xenophobia or hate crimes, hate speech. And racism, my friends, is an outbreak that knows no border or boundaries. It afflicts individuals of all ages, cultures, ethnicities, faiths, and backgrounds. Its consequences are far-reaching, obstructing our path towards the realization of the Sustainable Development Goals. Regrettably, the COVID-19 pandemic unfortunately has exacerbated this issue, leading to an alarming surge in racism and discrimination. The faith community is bearing a disproportionate brunt of this burden in all around the world. In these challenging times, it has become evident that young people are the driving force behind the positive change. Engaging our youth is not just essential, it's imperative for making substantial strides towards realizing the Sustainable Development Goals and eradicating racism. And unfortunately, in the last decades, we are witnessing that there is no safe haven to keep you safe of the threat of the racism. I mean, we have unfortunately witnessed the Christchurch attacks in New Zealand, which is a peaceful, tranquil country, and we have witnessing attacks in Rohingya in all around the world. So you cannot run away, cannot turn your back and run away from the racism. You have to struggle. You have to combat on daily basis. Please allow me to share some examples of how ICYF has been actively involving this combat in youth actions that promote a culture of peace, inclusivity, and respect for all cultures and faiths. And as ICYF, and as we are witnessing the efforts of RFP, Religions for Peace Institution, we are trying to combat, we are trying to struggle with this new wave of racism by positive agenda. We are trying to promote the peace culture. We are trying to share the positive examples. We are trying to spread the message of peace of the faiths. And we are hoping always for the best. We have been witnessing remarkable youth-led campaigns against racism and discrimination. These campaigns connect the power of social media, art, and community outreach to raise awareness and foster tolerance. Our young advocates are utilizing digital platforms to amplify their voices, share personal stories, and mobilize support of anti-racism initiatives. Through creative expressions, including art, music, and spoken word, they engage with the diverse audiences, challenging stereotypes and nurturing understanding. As ICYF, we are organizing events and projects in different parts of the world on a daily basis. And our ultimate goal is to create new bridges and new communication ways between the communities, introducing the communities to each other. And also we are trying to create new ways of communication among the interfaith groups. ICYF plays an essential role in facilitating the youth participation in policy discussions, both at the national and international levels. Youth delegates bring fresh perspectives and innovative solutions to the table, contributing to the development of the comprehensive strategies for combating racism within legislative frameworks. Their insights enrich policy debates, ensuring that the voice of young people are heard and considered in the formulation of anti-racist policies. Recognizing the strength of the unity and cooperation, ICYF has formed coalitions with youth-led organizations and faith-based groups to jointly address racism and all challenges facing youth. These coalitions serve as formidable front against the discrimination, pooling resources, expertise, and advocacy efforts. By working collaboratively, we can maximize our impact and create a unified force dedicated to eradicating racism and promoting inclusivity. Because this hate crimes and racism is a problem of the whole humanity, not only the Muslims, not only the Christians, or not only the Buddhists, but all faith groups, all the humanity is a target of the racism and hate crimes. So we have to combat against racism hand in hand, all together as humanity. And unfortunately, we are witnessing the attacks on holy books. We are witnessing the attacks on holy sites. We are witnessing the new waves of racism in all around the world. There are still ongoing and unsolved problems, and now we are witnessing, unfortunately, the new problems rising. Moreover, we recognize the importance of the collective efforts in combating racism. ICYF actively engages in partnerships with other NGOs, faith leaders, and governments to address this global issue effectively. And in this regard, I again want to express my profound thanks to Religions for Peace institution, because they are really helpful to us and very constructive and supportive to our efforts on combating the racism and all kinds of peace spreading projects. Together, we create impactful projects and campaigns with our allies and partners. Finally, Islamic Cooperation Forum is steadfastly committed to working hand in hand with all faith communities to foster understanding, dialogue, and peaceful coexistence. Our commitment extends to achieving improved well-being and prosperity for all. We firmly believe in the power of meaningful youth engagement as evidenced by our youth-led campaigns, policy discussions, coalitions, publications, workshops, and collective efforts in combating racism effectively. It's worth realizing and capitalizing on the reality that our youth are globally faithful citizens with the guidance of the holistic education and values. They possess the capacity to change the map and reality, ultimately contributing to making the world a better place for everyone. In conclusion, let us reflect on the valuable insights we have gained from our partners in this very blessed journey and celebrate the commitment of people of faith, our young people, and tremendous efforts of our main partners, Religion for Peace and Islamic Fiqh Academy. Together, we find the motivation to carry forward the mission of faith for inclusive societies, a core value rooted in Islamic traditions and practices. Thanks to all for to coming here and who contribute to the success of this special event. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now let us hear from His Excellency Dr. Sano, who is joining us virtually. Dr. Sano, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, lady. Brothers and sisters, all lovers of peace, peace be upon you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First and foremost, our deep apology that we couldn't make the travel to come to New York to be with my dear brother, my dear friend, Dr. Taha, and to be with you in the regions for peace. I hope today with this new technology, we could still continue to communicate and raise and send to you what do you think. I would like to congratulate you and to commend the choices of this topic, which is timely. Even though we've been over 70 or been so many decades, we have been talking about it and fighting and bringing forward so many initiatives. How can we go about and how we finish with this racism? But we want looking for more peaceful world, and we want to have this sustainable development for all, and we want everybody to enjoy the peace, enjoy the security, and enjoy the opportunities that we do have here. So therefore, choosing the youth to be part of this, to be engaged, knowing that they are representing more than 70% of the whole population, it is in our hand, it is an obligation upon us to bring them and let them be part of a discussion or this one, to give them more logical, more insightful, give them more convincing manner why we have to abolish and why we have to go against this racism. I'm grateful to you and the first speaker who gave all kind of this the informations that it will not be enough for us to continue to say the racism, how evil it is, and how to be making the life difficult for everyone, how will be putting in danger the peace and the security and safety and the progress of all humankind. From the religious background, from the religious point of view, it's very clear, no religions on the earth, the real one, except that could be the interpretation of a human being, will call upon its follower to be racist, to go against others because of differences. You may have human beings who have been hijacking the religions, and who have been doing all evil things in the name of religion. So therefore, the time has come that we must differentiate between the interpretations and between the actions and behavior of those people who might be using or utilizing the religion or race sometime. We are having the extremism, we are having the terrorism. They might be hijacking the religion to do all evil things. But we are having the racist and xenophobists and people who are today are known to be against every single differences. They want to see the whole world the same way that they are. Those people are different from them in terms of race, in terms of the opinion, in terms of ideas. They don't want them to be in this world. So we are calling upon these people to believe, to tell them that nobody has chosen his or her race. We're all born in this. It was not me who decided and who negotiated with my parents to be what I am today. Not my parents also decided and discussed with their parents to be what they were before I was born in this. I was in this life there. So therefore, we want the youth to get it clear. It is in the interest of the youth that they have to be in the front line to fight against this racism, because it is against them, against their future, against their security, against their progress, against the sustainability and the peace, the world peace at large. So apart from the religious institutions, we have Fiqh Academy. Fiqh Academy is the largest, biggest reference for the Muslim world. We are the Muslims come today about 2 billion Muslims. We are different when you come to the religious preferences, religious position, religious statements with issues related to the contemporary life there. So we have been entrusted with the command of our leaders of the 57 nations, the Muslim world. We should tell the people what the religion is about. We should tell the people that Islam is the first enemy of racism. Islam has been fighting and continue to fight from the day one. If you look at the life of the Prophet of the Islam, you will find him the day one when the people were enslaved, when the people have been discriminated, we have been just taken away, they have been persecuted because of their race, how he stood by them and how he was defending these things. The religion, the text, we will not be having time to tell you how many texts we do have in the holy books, in the traditions, in the practices, and how the Islam was considering all form of racism as an evil and shouldn't be tolerated and shouldn't be accepted, shouldn't be interpreted, shouldn't be associated to the religion, because you may have some of those racist, interpretation of the text. So no Arab is better than non-Arab, no black is above non-black, or no Muslims is above non-other Muslims. But Islam tend to say, to believe that they have to come. They were all the children of Adam and Abe. They were born the same way. They will be buried in the same way. They were brought up in this life in the same way. Why you are making the differences? Because of their races, because of their color, because of their ethnicity, even because of their religion. So something they have not chosen, you have been punishing somebody for something that he or she did not choose at the first place there. So therefore, the religion, the faith, we at the religion adapt, we have to work harder, hand in hands, and to denounce and to reject all of those people might be calling and doing something in the name of religion. That the religions are clear about this issue. The religion have made all the texts. Go to Bible, go to Torah, go to the Quran, go to any text you do have. In Hinduism or Buddhism, in any religion, you will find that the first enemy of this religion has been the racism. So we have to work harder, and we have to make sure that we coordinate our efforts and make sure that we'll be one single hand. We'll have one single position against those forms of racism. It could be today reflected in different manner. When you are depriving some people from some opportunity because of their race, because of their belief, then you are a racist, and that way against the peace and the stability of the world. When you have been getting some other people, rejecting other people because of their race, because how they look, because how they were born, what is the color of their skin, or what is the color, what the religion they are following, then you have been an enemy of the world peace. So the peace, the world will not be peace, safety, will not be a place of safety, will not be a place that we could enjoy all together until we work together to go against our common enemy. The racism is a common enemy for the humanity. I think today, if I have a chance to be in the, what do you call it, the Security Council, we would just decide to say, could you just define and get this one? Among the crime against the humanity is the racism. The racism should be considered as a crime against the humanity, because there's no difference between the people who are taking the life of millions or thousands of people because of nothing, because of the politics, ambition, and all the things, and there's somebody who depriving thousands or millions of people from some opportunity or treating them because of their race and all the things. So the Security Council itself could be a call that to put this one inside the crimes that have been just arbitrarily classified as what do you call it, the crime against the humanity. I won't take that much to say, but I would have to tell you that we have issued a lot of resolutions, and we continue doing these resolutions. We have been telling, and we have been calling, we have been writing, we have been making it clear, if no matter who will be doing it, we do not want anybody to do it in the name of religion, but we want all religions to come together. We will be there as Muslims, we will be there as a Fiqh intellectual, as the scholars, they will be behind the youth, behind the organizations and institutions which are promoting that the fighting against this crime against the humanity. Let me just accept, I just call upon you to accept it. We can work harder and try to say whoever he or she is been promoting this racism in any place in the world, in anywhere in the world, that we might be careful and looking at that person as committing a crime against the humanity, because he's been doing something that would not be tolerated and which is against the peace of the whole world. We will not be safe in this life, we will not be safe in the world if we are having these people maybe taking the people, because the racism may go up in the hand, in the brain, in the heart of those racist people. They may end up to abuse, because people don't become terrorists for nothing. When they become to have started somewhere, the racism also should be something we could be bringing the people to end up to be danger, and to end up to be some people who will be making the life of the innocent people. That's why. How could I be going to tell somebody, I don't like you, or I don't want you to have this right, and then at the same time, for what reason? Is it because his or her actions or her behavior of that same thing? No, it is just because the race. Looking at the race, that is superior compared to other race. How could it be that way? Were they born a different way? Will they be buried in different way? Will they be living different way? Are they really breathing something different? Are they having anything in this life which is different from other human beings? There's no such, and there shouldn't be such. Somebody is short, other is tall, that somebody is fat, other is thin, somebody is black, the other is yellow, the other one is red, somebody is ugly, the other one is. That thing has nothing to do with the people's behavior and actions. If you want to just take an actions against anybody, or you want to come and say, you should be doing this one, a reference to his or her actions and deeds, that one he or she control. You control your actions, you control your deeds, but you cannot control your race. You cannot control all of those, the ethnicity, you cannot control all the things which are beyond you, because you have never been consulted. There's no way that you have been told before your birth, that you will be at that way there. So I end up to say, in summary, let us work as religion, as organizations, call upon the Security Council, call upon all these other international institutions, let us classify that the racism, it is a crime against the humanity. Let it be an additional crime to be listed in that books that they do have, and then people can go after those racists at all levels, in its all forms, without differentiation, because we will be racist if you do not go against the racism, if you do not go against the racist and try to do this one. Fiqh Academy welcomes any collaboration with any institutions in the world, because this is one of our mission, one of our main objectives, that we will not be and we shouldn't be, and we have to be with you to fight, to eradicate, to look for, and to work harder for eradication and abolition of this racism in the world. We want to have peace, and there will be peace as long as the racism is growing, is having its say, it's having its actions, it's been reflected in deeds and actions of one and others. Could it be the political masters? It could be the opportunists. Should be those people who are not having brain and they keep controlling for whatever reasons in the name of race, in the name of superiority of some other human being, as they were not human being. They have a special race, a special status of this one that we do not want it. And let us work on that. I'm thankful to you again and grateful for that one. For the next time, the next opportunity will be next to you. We may have more consulted and constructed and restructured and concreted workshop and activities and actions that we can forward, and let it be introduced in all schools, in the curriculum, in the thoughts, in the mosque, in the churches, in anything that we do. As a religion, as religions, we must stand together, and we must fight together against this crime, and that cannot be tolerated anymore. I thank you again, and looking forward to seeing you soon in Jeddah, if it's not possible in New York next time. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. At this moment, I would like to welcome Professor Nazila Ganea, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief, to give a keynote presentation on the impact of racism on youth and marginalized communities. Professor Ganea, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, Gunaydin. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Thank you very much for inviting me to join this distinguished panel and on this very important topic. It's a great pleasure to join you in this event that is motivated by the urgency of the need to engage youth in the abolition of racism from a faith perspective, and to achieve a sustainable and peaceful future for all. I would like to convey my thanks to the Islamic Cooperation Youth Forum, Religions for Peace, and the International Islamic Fiqh Academy for the invitation to join you. I was going to be joining you online, but good fortune allowed me to be here with you in person. The comprehensive title of this event goes some way towards capturing the action that must be taken in order to address intersecting crises which humanity in general faces. And as you were saying, Your Excellency, earlier, that is all the more urgent for youth, who do constitute the majority of the world population, and after all will be on this earth for longer than many of the rest of us. In this city, as discussions on the future of the SDGs are ongoing, and those with the power to take decisive action in this area are amidst us, they would do well to also listen in on what is being put forward in this room. If the Sustainable Development Agenda is relevant to anyone, of course it is most relevant to youth. And of the many challenges that are faced, racism in all its forms finds itself to be devastating to quite a number of those goals and targets. And of the many resources that we need to garner in order to try to achieve the agenda of the Sustainable Development Goals, faith is one of the most powerful. The Black feminist activist Audre Lorde, who was born in New York, has famously said that there is no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. There are many quotes that try to capture a term that is now often described as intersectionality, a term that was coined or at least made more famous by another Black feminist scholar and activist, Kimberly Crenshaw, whilst trying to draw attention to the unique forms of discrimination that are experienced by Black women, where their gender and their race compounds the discrimination that they face in unique and additional ways. The use of this term intersectionality is now quite commonplace. As one women's rights activist from Latin America shared with a colleague of mine, she said the political economy is a hard science, but not believing in intersectionality is like saying you don't believe in gravity. Many of us who are working in the human rights arena are very aware of the Vienna Declaration on Programme of Action and its emphasis and capture that human rights as well. Human rights are interdependent and marginalization is often interrelated in many different forms. It's sometimes difficult to capture this precisely in legal terms, but there are many judicial and quasi-judicial mechanisms that are struggling and making good effort in trying to understand it. Why do I say this? Because I think today we are looking at the intersecting marginalization that is sometimes experienced by youth, perhaps of a different ethnicity, perhaps migrants in some contexts, and people of faith. So when it comes to the special procedures and the special rapporteurs of the UN human rights system, at least the procedures that we work within lend themselves to an intersectional lens and to cooperation to try and capture and respond to multiple marginalizations. So we research, we report, and we communicate, and we regularly coordinate our efforts. So, there's a UN Special Rapporteur on racism, there's a UN Special Rapporteur, in this case, on freedom of religion or belief. There's UN Special Rapporteurs that deal with violence against women. There's UN Special Rapporteurs concerned about child rights, and I don't mean to call youth children, but the UN definition is under 18, so certainly there is some overlap of youth and children. So in the case of the special procedures, our communications to states regarding issues of concern often lead to cooperation. Let me give some examples of it. Since 2010, there have been dozens of communications by special rapporteurs that have concerned themselves both with freedom of religion or belief and with contemporary forms of racism. Back in 2006, there was a joint report by the then UN Special Rapporteur Asma Jahangir on freedom of religion or belief, and the report was jointly produced with the Special Rapporteur on racism. So that cooperation and coordination is quite often the case. When it comes to human experience, I think many of you have sadly may have experienced or certainly heard about the vivid experiences of racial discrimination and its impact on marginalized youth and communities. There are some specific situations of which I'll only share 3
that this mandate has intervened on in recent years. The ongoing repression faced by Rohingya, Muslims and Christians in Myanmar is one such example, and one that is very close to our minds. In March 2022, the Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion and Belief and the Special Rapporteur on Racism sent a joint communication along with the Special Rapporteur on Internally Displaced Persons to draw attention regarding the catastrophic human rights violations resulting from the targeting of these religious and racialized minorities. On the 27th of March this year, I joined the working group of the experts on people of African descent to draw attention to the situation of Afro-descendant populations in Guyana. In this communication, we pointed out the particular situation of intersectional discrimination being suffered by Rastafari Afro-Guyanese, who particularly are exposed to poverty, disease, illiteracy, and that all of these detrimental effects accrue onto them because they belong to a religious and cultural minority. On the 10th of May this year, I joined the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, along with the Special Rapporteur on Contemporary Forms of Racism and several others, to raise concern about the consequences of the US Supreme Court's 2022 landmark decision in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. Dozens of states had all but completely banned access to abortion for women, and the effect of this will be felt not least by women belonging to racial and religious minorities, and also adolescent girls. So these are just three examples of coordination and cooperation on intersecting marginalizations, including as they relate to youth. These are only three examples of, sadly, very widespread phenomenon experienced along, all over the world, and which occupies these and many other mandates on a weekly basis. So what can a special rapporteur do? As I suggested, we can report 2 thematic reports per year. We can go on country missions to look comprehensively, in this case, at freedom of religion or belief as experienced by all within that jurisdiction, and to raise these communications with states, and of course to engage and benefit from forums such as this one. Those who seek to act violently to convince others to do so, or to tolerate violence against a given group, always seek to cloak their violence as justifiable. Sometimes even they argue that it is a form of self-defense. Discriminatory political projects often seek to leverage stereotypes about religions, beliefs, or cultures, and they do so through racism and xenophobic marginalization. Discourses which promote marginalization of indigenous peoples, anti-Semitism, anti-Black racism, and Islamophobia are just some of the examples where anti-migrant sentiment is raised sometimes to supposedly draw attention to the dangers posed by the majority. So what are they doing? They're leveraging hatred and distrust of minorities in order to justify supposed protection of the majority. If one is convinced that particular persons are potential apostates, blasphemers, illegal immigrants, terrorists, or anti-development, this appears to serve those who try to justify their hatred of asylum seekers, of refugees. And this can lead to the burning of synagogues, mosques, churches, temples, places of worship, pillaging of traditional indigenous lands, or the military targeting of IDP camps. The horrors are many. The discussion and critique of religious doctrine, however, we need to protect. We need to protect the sphere in which each person explores and is able to have dialogue on matters of religion or belief. This is part of the protections of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights from 75 years ago, and the many instruments that we have achieved since then. Nevertheless, we must be awake to the misuse of such discourse in order to disguise racial, ethnic, or national hatred and incitement. So we must protect the sphere of dialogue, engagement, and sometimes disagreement. You know, we come to different truths, we explore, or we're in different stages of our life. We might be embracing matters of faith or no faith in different ways. Different communities come to different conclusions on that matter, but we mustn't use that in a way that disguises racism and hatred. The recent and reprehensible incidents of the burning of the Holy Quran in several countries may not be very far from your minds. They took place in a context characterized, in some contexts that were characterized by Islamophobic discourse and far-right political parties. As the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, said in his address to the UN Human Rights Council Urgent Debate, these actions were manufactured to express contempt and inflame anger, to drive wedges between people and to provoke, transforming differences of perspective into hatred and sometimes violence. We need to be able to address incitement to national, racial, or religious violence. And this has been of great concern to the international community since at least the late 1990s. One example of that being captured in the joint report I mentioned earlier from 2006. The international community has invested much diplomacy to come to concrete frameworks for combating religious intolerance, stigmatization, discrimination, and violence based on religion or belief. Resolution 1618 was adopted in 2011 by the UN Human Rights Council and reaffirmed state obligations, commitments, and it also contained an action plan for states to address such challenges, to seek to address such challenges. We must be concerned about actions that willfully exploit tensions or target individuals on the basis of their religion or belief, as the High Commissioner also mentioned. These may constitute incidents of stigmatization and intolerance, but there's a positive role, as was mentioned earlier, there's a positive role for expression and dialogue. I was quite excited to hear about the youth activities that you continue to hold around the world. In fact, Resolution 1618 at the heart of it has the 8-part action plan that was drawn from the speech of the Secretary General of the OIC, Professor Ehsan Olu. These lines of action constitute a roadmap for fostering a domestic environment of religious tolerance, peace, and respect. If anybody is in touch with Professor Ehsan Olu, please convey my regards. I met him a lot in those years. Resolution 1618 has a dedicated mechanism for follow-up, and indeed it's called the Istanbul process, which is facilitated by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. That also gave rise and inspired the Faith for Rights framework, which seeks to do exactly what was being mentioned earlier, to in fact channel the spiritual resources and motivation that flows from religions and beliefs around the world to promote the human rights of all and all human rights for all. And perhaps the Faith for Rights framework is familiar to you, and if not, I recommend that you may want to look it up. This year's events, of course, brought up new resolutions, both in the General Assembly and the Human Rights Council. Resolution 53.1 calls on the special procedures to make recommendations on addressing the advocacy of religious hatred, including acts of desecration of sacred books that could, not necessarily do, but that could constitute incitement to discrimination, hostility, or violence. I say could because it depends on, we need to be mindful of the context, we need to be mindful of the speaker, we need to be mindful of the influence of the speaker, etc., etc. It's with this in mind that I decided that my next country visit should be to Sweden, In fact, that will be next month. During my visit, I'll engage with communities affected by racism and religious hatred, including, I hope, youth representatives, and also faith-based actors and, of course, state authorities, to try and explore more the nature of the events, the context that gave rise to the issues, any shortcomings of policy and practice, any recommendations regarding how it might be addressed in the future. Also, my next thematic report to the UN Human Rights Council, which will be presented next March, will focus on hatred based on religion or belief and its relationship to intolerance, discrimination, and violence. Not only hatred, but also how that can be transformed. And the transformative vision that you had in mind for this event is also very inspiring. We can, of course, look at negative forces around us, but what are we going to do about it? I think, as you said, youth are particularly creative and insightful into what action can be taken to address it, rather than wallowing in the hatred. Yes, we need to acknowledge it. Yes, we need to confront it. And then next, we need to try and seek ways of addressing it and transform it. I have a call for input regarding that report, and I would really welcome you to input on that, because the insights, the experiences, the projects you have in the world can indeed really enrich the report and with ideas and concrete experiences about how we can transform hatred and intolerance into understanding and upholding each other's dignity and rights. The deadline for that, sadly, has to be end of October, so I urge you, but it's only 2,500 words, so I urge you to try and contribute to that. The value of freedom of speech and freedom of expression is well established in international human rights standards, and much is made of it in current affairs, especially in social media. We see many instances of it, which also gives rise to controversies. But dialogue is not of much use, or expression is not of much use if it can't also contribute to dialogue. And dialogue doesn't mean we speak past each other. We may sometimes overlook the centrality of listening actively, compassionately, and deeply. We need to understand the experiences of intolerance and marginalization that people feel around the world. Much of the discrimination and intolerance regarding religion or belief is these days not even understood. We need to make that invisible experience visible. We need to stand in solidarity and seek to address those experiences and those pains and channel it into more active responses to it. Religious minorities around the world, racialized communities and youth are sometimes heard but not listened to enough. I encourage the youth, I look forward to the next panel, to not only hearing youth speak out, but I will also seek to listen, and I'm grateful of the opportunity to do so today. With that, I want to thank the organizers for this invitation and underline my commitment to serving the struggle against racism, religious or belief hatred in all its forms. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ganea, for an enlightening presentation. I would like to thank our esteemed speakers, Ms. Deepika Singh, Your Excellencies Dr. Taha Ayan, Your Excellency Dr. Kutub Mustafa Sano, and Professor Ganea for providing us a solid foundation for the next portion of our program, which is the interactive panel discussion. Now I would like to invite Reverend Doyon Park, who serves as a minister and representative of Won Buddhism to the United Nations at the Manhattan Won Buddhist Temple, to introduce our distinguished panelists and moderate the panel discussion, as well as the brief Q&A session. But first, we will hear some introductory remarks from Reverend Doyon. Reverend Doyon, the floor is yours.
Thank you, everyone. Maybe I want to invite all our panelists come sitting in front here. Again, thank you for being here following this insightful address by Professor Gadea. So we're now honored to transition into this profound panel discussion here. So today we're here, united from various traditions, and I believe we all, as a people of faith, we believe that faith holds a deep power to motivate, unite, and transform. And our youth, bursting with energy and foresight, symbolize not only the promise of tomorrow, but the very vibrant force of today. And by merging the depth of faith with the passion of our young generation, we seek a path forward to obliterate the scourge of racism today. So let's journey together. I wanna have more space for our young youth representative here. And let me first quickly introduce our panelists here. First, we have from my closest side here, Mr. Petro Batur Atoli, the director of Santige Bio Solidarity Project right here in New York City. And then we have Ms. Miriam Abuka Dazora, the youth representative from the Ghana Conference of Religions for Peace. Welcome. And next, my dear colleague friend, we also have with us Imam Khalid Latif, who wears many hats, university chaplain at New York University, executive director of the Islamic Center at NYU, and a co-founder of many institutes for multi-faith leadership, just to name a few. And then last but not least, here joining us virtually, we have Mr. Christian Kazadi Lupemba, the chairperson of the Religions for Peace Interfaith Youth Network from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So we have three panelists here in person on the stage, and then we have one from the Zoom joining us here. So each panel will be presented with 2 rounds of questions, and our panelists will have around 2 minutes to respond to that. So I wanna start. I wanna invite first Imam Khalid Latif to share his insight. So my question will be, so over the past 2 decades, religious communities have faced increased hate crimes and violence. And based on your experience as a religious leader and in academia, so how do the social structures of racism perpetuate harmful narratives of racism worldwide? The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I think the key word in this question is the word narrative. And to be able to understand how narrative of fear gets constructed very purposely, and to be able to think about this not just in terms of discrimination, prejudicial behavior that is problematic that people might engage on a day-to-day level, but elevating it to understand it on the level of what is systemic and structural, and to think about how that is very purposely built in the standpoint of gatherings such as ours right now, where people come together for the sole purpose of saying, how do we continue to marginalize? How do we continue to engage in inequitous behaviors? I want to read to you, for example, to illustrate from the United States during the Nixon campaign, there was a individual by the name of John Ehrlichman, who was a key figure in the Watergate scandal. And he's quoted on the record as saying, the Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had 2 enemies, the anti-war left and Black people. Do you understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or Black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and Blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. Organized evil will always triumph over disorganized righteousness. This is truth, whether we accept it or not. And to be able to understand that the narratives of fear that we get bombarded with consciously or unconsciously are very purposely driven through systemic and structural mechanisms that continue to allow those who have power and privilege to retain that power and privilege at the expense of those that are underserved and underprivileged. I think the remarks from before were very important to understand, especially when we're talking about invisibility, but I would add a nuance to it and say that it's not necessarily that narrative is invisible, it's erased purposefully. And to think, how do we disrupt that, and to recognize what that means on a very tangible level. I've been to Myanmar and worked with Rohingya populations. I was on the ground in Bangladesh right after the border was opened and 500,000 Rohingya exited from their homeland. And that many more each and every day were crossing a border, women and children in large part. There wasn't one refugee that I met who couldn't tell me that they hadn't seen loved ones burned alive in front of their eyes. People who told me about their entire villages being decimated, individuals lined up person next to person next to person, shot point blank, their entire belongings and possessions just firebombed. This is the consequence now of narrative that is like this, that builds itself up and perpetuates now gross stereotypes to control mass population, to be able to influence passivity that removes us as key variables from ensuring things like this don't happen. And this will be the last thing that I'll say here. For example, in the United States, we have a war on terror that they can't say is a war on Muslims, the same way a war on drugs they can't say is a war on Black people. But in understanding the pattern through which those narratives get constructed, there's commonality that's there. The utilization of terminologies by politicians and others like Islamist, jihadist, fundamentalist, terrorist. Media apparatus showing shows like 24 and Homeland to reinforce stereotypes. As you then have built out both a domestic and foreign policy that destabilizes numerous areas of the world, creates all kinds of challenges. For myself, for example, I could tell you as somebody who sat down with presidents of various countries, I've shared stages with the Pope and the Dalai Lama, been interviewed by numerous media outlets, awards. I've still had the FBI visit me in my home. When I ask them, what is it that you want from me? They say, you're too good to be true. Know that we're watching you. I went to Turkey to do relief work right after the earthquake. We raised $1 million as a student-based community in less than a week to assist people. The Turkish government, their Ministry of Emergency Services, Turkish Airlines were hosting, sponsoring our visit. When I gave my ticket to the agent on a red-eye flight here in New York, I heard a voice behind me call my name. I assumed it was the agent again, and I turned around and there were 4 federal law enforcement officers wanting to talk to me. Why do they need 4 federal law enforcement officers to talk to me? The idea is to reinforce narratives, internalize racisms, to have a psychological shackling. To understand the root of this, especially in the prism of anti-Muslim sentiment, you can't deal with things that are just symptomatic, especially when we talk about systems that are doing exactly what they were built to do. So you have to understand that its root is a deeply entrenched anti-Blackness that permeates societies all around the world. And if you don't name what the actual illness is, you're going to continue to deal with symptoms reactively, and supremacy in all of its forms, claiming to be a primordial state of existence, is going to always now impact those that are other than that in the ways that we see. So when we look at the war on drugs and we see politicians utilizing terms like predator and thug to speak of our Black brothers and sisters, TV shows like Cops airing on national television to reinforce stereotypes, where usually white men in blue uniforms are arresting black people, and an entire prison industrial complex that is the outcome of a stratified society that starts from slavery, builds into the new Jim Crow era, and gets us to a place of this prison industrial complex that disrupts the lives of hundreds of thousands, but all people are watching and they don't do anything. The way that they watch genocides, the way that they see what's happening in Myanmar, the way that they see what happens in India, the way that they see what's happening in so many different places in the world, people sit back and do nothing. And those narratives of fear construct now this paralysis. They keep people who have their own privilege and power, and it has this other consequence that says it's on the oppressed demographic to be the ones that speak louder, to be the ones that push against this in these ways. So when we say, how is it doing this? It's doing it really well because it's doing what it was intended to do, to continue to marginalize and discriminate. And the gross consequence is that people are losing their lives, but the people who perpetuate it, they could really care less.
Thanks. We'll come back to you again. Next question will go to Ms. Miriam. So as a youth representative for the Ghana Conference for Religions for Peace, so you champion youth voice in Ghana and in Africa. So what in your view are the key impacts of systemic racism on youth and marginalized groups?
When we hear of the word, when people mention racism, what comes to mind is a white man hating on a black, or a black hating on a white person. But from the context that I come from, Ghana, what we call racism there is tribalism. And this is no less than what we call racism. And it has affected societal progress. For instance, when we take the issue of unemployment, the youth are unable to get jobs. If you want a job, it's no longer about your competence. It's about whom you know. It's about the kind of tribe you are from. And if you are not from this particular tribe, you are denying certain opportunities. And this has been going on for so long, driving people to engage in all sorts of violent activities, because if they have to struggle for their basic right, it is not possible. We have been trying so much to go to school, get better grades, and find better jobs. But you come back and you sit at home with your certificate. Your competence is nothing to the high and mighty. If you do not belong to this particular tribe, you don't get this job. I personally know of people who have been denied job opportunities, internship opportunities, just because of their last name, indicating the particular tribe they are from. Another issue is the Islamophobia in Ghana. There is no doubt that Christians and Muslims have long lived in harmony. But the recent occurrence where Muslim students are being denied their right to be in school, their right to pray, their right to fast, or to even wear their hijab. Some put their hijab in their school bags and go to school without wearing it. And when they close, they put it on their way back. We've had instances of students dying because they were trying to hide from going to morning mass. If we claim that we are a country that believes in multiculturalism, multi-religious, why can't we respect our views, our differences, and leverage on our commonalities to achieve a better future? This even happens in our political space. It's about whom you know. And speaking to some colleagues from other African countries, it's the same. And you know, sometimes people practice this unaware, and they do not know they are promoting tribalism or racism. It's a sad one for the youth in Africa. It's really a sad one, and it's hard for them, and especially the marginalized communities, because if you do not have a particular name, I keep stressing on this because that's the order of the day. You have to come from a particular tribe. You have to know a particular minister. Your name has to be on that protocol list before you can get a job. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miriam. So next question will go to Mr. Pietro. So can you identify major systems in place that encourage ongoing racism in your region of the world, and how similar are those to other parts of the world?
Sure. Thank you for the question. I have to apologize in advance because this really isn't my area of expertise, and I feel a little bit out of my element surrounded by such esteemed co-panelists. And I would really like to thank Imam Latif for his opening words, because I think he elaborated much of what we see here in the United States. I believe he and I share that. We both live in New York City, which is a nice thing to share. And what I wish to underline from what he said, and I hope everyone can go back, I mean, as notes, or if you share more of what you said earlier, is how, and again, I apologize for focusing on the United States, because that's my context here, how the history of racism in the United States has simply been recombined, retransformed, represented to package the same structural racism that has existed from the founding of the country, before the country was even founded, to continue the same racial divisions, to continue the same racist policies with new names. Imam Latif mentioned mass incarceration. We can talk about redlining. We can talk about different bank policies. We can talk about the lack of investment in African and Black and brown communities in the United States across the board, in education and health and food insecurity and across the board. An intentional policy at all levels, you can say national, federal, statewide, citywide, countywide, district, to ensure that what was originally named explicitly as Blacks, then you can say, oh, the inner city, or you can say the poor, were kept down. And what I would like to kind of highlight in all of this, and I think Imam Latif spoke much better than I can about the actual practical elements here, is the stickiness, in a sense, the greed of human power, which is that it is very, very difficult, if not impossible, for people with privilege, people with comfort, to willingly give that up. And I think that is the major structural obstacle that we have to overcoming racism in this country. And people at this point feel that they are no longer privileged. They choose to see that they choose not to see that they are privileged. They've been convinced by the narratives that Imam Latif so eloquently pointed out. And so they opt not to. And that allows the racism that has existed in this country for centuries to continue on and directly affects the lives of many. I'll keep it short because I know we are short on time.
Thank you so much. Now we want to welcome Mr. Christian from the Zoom joining us. So you are, as a chairperson of the Religions for Peace Interfaith Youth Network in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, I believe that you've seen the significance of youth inclusion in addressing global challenges. So from your experience, what's the added value of youth involvement in effectively tackling the systemic racism? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. I hope you can hear me clearly. So, meaningful youth engagement holds immense value in combating systemic racism effectively here in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Although, if I have to point out, as my friend Miriam said already, that in my country and in many other African countries, racism is expressed more in the form of tribalism or ethnicity. The inclusion and active participation of young people in this endeavor is crucial due to several reasons. Firstly, youth possess unique perspectives. They have fresh ideas and progressive thinking that challenge conventional norms and stereotypes. They bring a sense of urgency and enthusiasm to dismantle deep-rooted discriminatory practices, ultimately leading to innovative solutions. Secondly, involving the youth demographic in decision-making process helps create policies that address their specific needs and experiences. This ensures a more inclusive approach that tackles the multifaceted aspects of racism comprehensively. Moreover, young people are adept of utilizing social media platforms and technology for mobilization, amplifying voices and spreading awareness on racial injustice, for example. Their widespread networks facilitate reaching diverse communities affected by systematic racism, fostering unity and solidarity necessary for effective change at the grassroots level. So in conclusion, meaningful youth engagement represents an essential asset in the fight against systemic racism, as it offers fresh perspectives, tailored interventions, technological capabilities, and community building potential to bring about sustainable transformation in society throughout the DRC or any other country in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So for the second round, maybe this will be the last question, and then also you can include your last kind of reflection for this part of sharing. Let's begin with Ms. Miriam. Again, maybe can you share with us some successful youth-led anti-racism initiatives or any community method or educational programs that you've been engaged with? And then you can also include your last kind of reflection for this part.
Okay, so before I talk about the works of Ghana Conference of Religions for Peace, which is the national affiliate of Religions for Peace International, I would like to say that the 1992 Constitution of Ghana prohibits against all kinds of discrimination against people on the basis of race, gender, ethnic background, social and economic status. And also the National Human Rights Organization in Ghana called the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice is also there to safeguard and protect human rights of all persons in Ghana, and also to ensure good governance for everyone. And also for the anti-racism activities, the most recent one was the Year of Return that was organized in Ghana. Even though that activity was kind of to boost tourism, it also recognized each and every one, the diverse backgrounds we have, and invited people from across the world to come to the country. And then also, we have SADA policy interventions. We have successfully adopted the policy of multiculturalism, and we have exhibited this through entertainments, beauty pageants, and yeah, this is one way that we try to bring people together to on the same ground to be able to exhibit their uniqueness and differences, and also to inform others. And for the first time, we had a beauty queen, a Muslim beauty queen who wore her hijab throughout, and it was a success story for us as a country. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, let's go to the Imam Khalid Latif. Again, I want to make it really brief here. The question is, how can we, as religious communities, collaboratively address all these issues that we've been talking about, this prejudice, discrimination, Islamic phobia, and violence? And then you can also share your last reflection for this panel.
Yeah, I think the recognition, one, of how individually we might benefit from these systemic and structural racisms. There's a very hard conversation to have inwardly, but to understand that it is built upon this idea that, people are not going to ever say it's an issue like that should be undermined. Food insecurity, for example, right? If you ask the average person, should everyone have food to eat? They're going to say, yes, everyone should have food to eat. But if you then deepen and say, well, why is there no food for some people to eat? That's when labels start to come out, and that's where conversation gets a little bit more dicey, because we don't want to get to the actual roots of certain things. Some of us benefit quite deeply from systemic oppression. We're afforded certain privileges and benefits, and if we're not willing to forego those benefits, we are allowing for these systems to continue to perpetuate themselves. And I think religious communities can do a lot to be able to educate their own congregants and constituents around what some of these things are. Two, I think the building of collaborative efforts and coalitions, those who are underserved and underprivileged can't have an expectation reasonably to just be in a place where they quote unquote put in hard work to break out of things. This is just a trope that gets applied to minorities. And so people of, I would say, true religious value that look at, well, what's the point of their religion to begin with? And if your religion is not bringing you to take on societal elements, I would say, what's really fundamentally the point of the practice of your faith? Where and how then you can recognize what you possess as a community or as an individual that can lend itself towards amplification of narratives, of experiences that are not necessarily put out there. So it's not just that marginalized communities are building collaborative efforts, but groups that know and recognize that they have privilege and they take up a lot of space can take a step towards a minority demographic and say, we're not going to be performative in our allyship towards you. We're going to let you follow, we're going to let you lead, and we're going to follow, not take on a savior mindset, and be in a place where we learn from you what it is your actual struggles are, so that we can advocate, utilize our strength and our power to be able to assist. It goes hand in hand with point number one. I think third, hope is very important. Quite often it can be very deflating when you're doing this kind of work. And it's very easy for it to be quite tokenizing as well. And so to ensure, especially when we're talking about young people, a sense of hope that's rooted in a solid implementation of a self-care strategy that says when you're taking on now institutions that have existed for centuries, they're not going to just let you sit there and take away what it was that they're willing to kill people to retain. So you have to make sure your wellness strategies are things that are in place, the momentum doesn't get stifled from burnout, right? It's like in the aftermath of a natural disaster, the whole world will seek to respond in the weeks later, but after months have passed or years have passed, the number of people that continue, they just stop because of this burnout mode. So that sense of wellness becomes really important. And the last thing that I would say here is understanding also this young demographic that we're working with in this prism of wellness. They've inherited a technology that is something that is quite difficult to really work with at times. As much as it can be something that is an antidote, it also creates for them high levels of anxiety, high levels of depression, all kinds of things that have now manifested in a pervasive form of loneliness that the world has never seen before. And then when you add to it the intersectionality that was being discussed before, recognizing that they're multifaceted but are still continuously being engaged just through one prism of their identity in a very reductive way, it's just adding now to that internal strife and the convening of peoples together to increase both respect and love. A mutual sense of just dignity that we share humanity becomes that much more important for a variety of reasons, so that that healing can take place. I know this is the last comments that we're making. If I can be helpful to any of you in anything you have going on, please don't hesitate in reaching out. I think that whether we're here virtually or in person, it's imperative that we are in a place where those of us who do this kind of work are actually sitting and thinking strategically on how it is that we do things together. Otherwise, convenings that take place per annum are going to be things that give a little bit of an inspiration for a bit, but then in between, people are reliant on the fact that we don't necessarily continue to come together beyond moments like this. So there's things that I can assist you with, things that you feel like I can be helpful with, please let me know, and it would be my honor to be able to assist in the good work that any of you all are doing.
Thank you so much. And our next question is for you to Mr. Christian. So drawing from your decade-long experience empowering youth, so how can we effectively involve them in battling racism, especially in education, employment, and healthcare access?
Yes, thank you for giving me the floor. I will try to share a bit on how youth empowered effectively in combating racism, particularly areas of education and employment. So in order to effectively involve youth in combating racism, particularly in areas such as education, it is crucial to provide them with comprehensive education that involves critical thinking and cultural awareness. That also places the same emphasis on spiritual and intellectual education. It's from a better combination of those two aspects of education that we get the kind of men we need in the DRC, but also in everywhere else in the world, to face up all forms of injustice, including racism. Schools should integrate anti-racist curriculum into their teaching methods by incorporating diverse perspectives, histories, and narratives within the educational framework. The first notion that must be inculcated in children from an early age is that of the oneness of humanity, which will help to break down the barriers created by a misinterpretation of history, a limited conception of our identity as human beings first, for belonging to a particular race, ethnic group, or tribe. Additionally, fostering open dialogue in creating spaces for students to discuss issues of race can encourage them to voice their concerns and actively participate in addressing racism. As far as job opportunities are concerned, various initiatives should be implemented to address this issue head-on, ensuring that young individuals are provided with equal opportunities regardless of their ethnicity. One such initiative is the establishment of training programs and workshops aimed at educating both employers and employees about diversity and inclusion within the workplace. This not only raises awareness about racism, but also equips young people. Furthermore, young people need to be made aware that access to employment should have two inseparable objectives: to improve their own life, but also to contribute to the betterment of society as a whole. Employment is not an opportunity to make money on the backs of others, but an opportunity to serve society, to give it back what it has given us as benefits, so that we can be useful both to ourselves, but also to the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, the next question goes to Mr. Petro. Petro, hi. So, from your experience, especially with the work of Sant'Egidio Solidarity Project, how have specific policies or their absence influenced the racial tensions on the ground and in social service entities? And you can also share your last reflection.
Sure. I would like to frame my answer to this question in light of the last year or so in New York City. Many of you may know of the recent swell, really, of arrivals, of migrant arrivals in New York City from many countries in Central America, South America, and actually many Francophone African countries as well, folks who have traveled through Brazil and then up through Central America. We've had over 100,000 people arrive, many of them, most of them crossing the southern border, and then either are bussed here unwillingly or choose to come here to pursue their asylum cases. New York City is a very interesting city when it comes to poverty and homelessness, which are two issues that overlap with this migration crisis very intensely, because we are what's called a right to shelter city. That means that anybody who is homeless in New York City has the right to a bed, whether it be in a large facility or a smaller one. The city can decide how to assign you, but you have the right to a bed. And that legal right counts also for these recently arrived migrants, fortunately. The dramatic and unfortunate fact, however, is that New York, prior to the arrival of these 100,000 people with no social connections, with no right to work, with no other right to public assistance, already had a overwhelming homeless population, around 50,000 people, already had a lack of shelter beds, already had an overburdened public assistance program that the city had regularly, now for the last decade, 2 decades, defunded, disincentivized, deprioritized, and had allowed this homeless population to grow, had allowed people in delicate and uncertain housing circumstances with no other issues except poverty to go homeless just by choice, basically. And when confronted with these recent arrivals and the requirement to house them, of course, the city at least is somewhat trying to cope and is trying to put these people in adequate settings. They've booked out hotels, they've repurposed gyms, they've repurposed fields and built field hospitals and that sort of thing. So the reaction has really been quite dramatic, whether or not you agree with it, but it's visually quite dramatic. And as somebody who spends most of their time out on the streets, and I spend a lot of time meeting folks who live on the streets, it is intense to see the vitriol that we hear, or that I hear at least, from people who are already living on the street against these recently arrived folks. I'm not surprised when I hear people in New York City who are well off or who come from certain backgrounds say, oh no, they shouldn't come here, not in my backyard, we want them to be happy, but not here, we can't. That's really unfortunate, disappointing, hurtful, but unfortunately not surprising. What has shocked me more really is this sense from folks who are suffering just as much, or if not more. And their words, for the most part, are, no one cares about us. No one responded to us like that. We're Americans. Look at these people. What do they have? Why do they get all this help? And I have to admit to you that my feeling is, oh my God, like, I don't know how to answer. It is the intentional or willful ignorance, in a sense, of the suffering of many that encourages them, basically, to take out their anger on the next closest, the next weakest possibility. And I think that many of the trends, many of the narratives that, again, Imam Latif mentioned early on, have influenced these folks, and I should admit also my own, understanding of these recent arrivals such that it is so easy to take out your anger on them. Instead of taking out your anger on the systems in place that have allowed you to remain homeless for 30 years, it's much easier to take it out on this newly arrived mother and son who are fleeing their country, who speak a language that you don't speak, who look different than you, but who were met with some sort of help that you felt you didn't get. And so the question that you asked included the phrase lack thereof, or lack of policy. And I think that's a really important theme for us to focus on, that racism, that evil, if just kind of allowed to fester, or even allowed to remain calm, will just remain latent. It doesn't die. It takes on a new face. It's repurposed. It gets creative. And instead, there needs to be an active and intentional building up of an alternative. So I hope that we can continue on in that way. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all of your experience and wisdom. Yes, last words?
So before we begin the Q&A, I've been in the US for a month and a couple of days, and what I have recognized is that when it comes to racism, is that unconscious bias that exists at both sides. People do it unaware, and as a youth, I believe that we need to speak up when we recognize these biases and prejudices, because if we don't, people will know. Those who do not know they have done it, or comments, this racial comments, because I was introduced to someone, a lady, an American, and what she said was, okay, so the person introducing me said, oh, here's Miriam. She's going to be in the US for some time. She's going to be with us here. And then she said, oh, welcome, but make sure you don't do anything bad here. And I was like, oh, why would she say that? And she said that, she didn't know she had said anything like serious, because she said that on her way without knowing that was like a racial comment. So I believe that this racism is not always obvious, and we have to speak out when we are confronted with issues of that. And also, when we do that, that is the only way that we can help build better policies that will ensure that each and every one of us have equal opportunities and justice. And I want to say that, and my belief is that there is no individual religion, country, black or white, that can resolve the issues of the community. That is why it is important that we make this world as inclusive as possible to ensure sustainable future for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So due to the time constraint, unfortunately, we will not be able to have a Q&A session, which means I believe that we need to come back another time for this conversation. Again, thank you so much for your sharing your wisdom and insight here. So I believe our combined efforts will pave the way for a more inclusive, more harmonious and sustainable future for all of us. So again, thank you so much for our panelists here.
Thank you very much, Reverend Doyon, for your expert moderation, and our distinguished panelists for that wonderful and rich interactive discussion. Now, I would like to welcome Dr. Fatila Grain, Senior Advisor and Director of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Cabinet at the Islamic Cooperation Youth Forum, to share some closing remarks. Dr. Grain, the floor is yours.
Peace upon you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed speakers and participants, I wrote most of my comments here, so I try to not repeat myself. I'm very glad that we were able to bring together this gathering to address this stagnant issue that became an obstacle for prosperity, development, and inclusion, especially for young people. In a world tainted by persistent scourge of racism, this event held on the margins of the United Nations General Assembly, UNGA, brought together dignitaries, esteemed speakers, and passionate youth participants under the theme engaging youth in the abolition of all forms of racism from faith perspective to achieve sustainable future for all. Hosted by significant organizations such as Religions for Peace and the International Fiqh Academy and the Islamic Cooperation Youth Forum. This gathering aimed to shed light on the critical role of youth in combating racism, all while viewing this global issue through the lens of faith. This event was a reflective gathering of minds, transcending various faiths, perspectives, and unifying diverse groups of experts and partners committed to addressing the persistent issues of racism and discrimination against faith communities. Throughout this event, opening remarks by Religions for Peace, ICYF, and Fiqh Academy, the keynote address by the Special Rapporteur for Freedom of Religion and Belief reminded us that we should work channeling resources, efforts, and spiritual channels to promote inclusion. All speakers embarked on a transformative journey exploring deep into the complex political, socio-economic structures that continue to the harmful narratives of racism and on a global scale. These structures, as we have discussed, are deeply rooted and they have profound implications for the communities worldwide. Questions arose regarding the identifications of major systems that sustain racism in different regions, revealing remarkable similarities that underscore the global nature of this challenge. A central theme that resonated through the event was the imperative of effectively engaging youth in the struggle against racism. Our discussions ventured into critical areas such as education, employment, and healthcare, where youth can play key roles in disseminating or dismantling the multifaceted manifestations of racism, including discrimination, bias, Islamophobia, and all types of violence. Another fundamental theme was the creation of sustenance of inclusive and diverse communities where different cultures coexist harmoniously. The event emphasized the vital role of interfaith collaboration and highlighted the extraordinary potential of youth in driving positive change and fostering tolerance and inclusivity. The event featured inspirational panel discussion where distinguished speakers from their diverse backgrounds shared their unique journeys and profound insights into the multifaceted challenges of combating racism, stereotypes, and discrimination. They underscored the need for institutional faith cooperation and eliminated the incredible capacity of youth as catalysts for positive change. Furthermore, the event explored into concrete examples of successful youth-led anti-racism initiatives, policy interventions, community-based approaches, and educational programs. These structured points of view serve as inspirational examples of hope, illustrating how youth can be powerful agents of transformation, driving tangible progress in our shared mission to combat racism and discrimination. Last, this event has not merely served as a platform for dialogue and collaboration. It has also reiterated our collective commitment to building a world free from racism and dedicated to sustainable development. At the end, it is important to extend deepest gratitude to all partners, speakers, participants, both in person and online. Your valuable inputs and commitments to this notable and noble cause are the driving forces behind our shared objectives. As we move forward, let us carry the valuable lessons learned and the profound assurance gained from this event and continue our journey toward creating more inclusive, tolerant, and safe world. The recommendations of the speakers were very constructive and practical. The event also was a success, or the event's success owed much to the dedication of all participants, reminding us that by working together, we can strive for a more inclusive, tolerant, and equitable world free from shackles of racism. It was an enjoyable and constructive event leading to more questions and more work to be done for the abolition of the last drop of racism. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Grind, for expertly wrapping up our event. In closing, please allow me to reiterate our deep gratitude to our esteemed speakers and distinguished panelists and all who attended our event both in person and virtually. On behalf of Religions for Peace, I would like to reiterate our deep appreciation to our partners, the Islamic Cooperation Youth Forum, ICYF, and the International Islamic Fiqh Academy, IIFA. Thank you very much, everyone, and we wish you a wonderful rest of your day.